right, so I want to continue our discussion on late classical sculpture and then bring it on into the Hellenistic period, and then we will look at architecture. Pretty easy to grasp. So we saw the work of Polyclitus and Phidias before. Polyclitus, the mathematical formula guy, adhered to that, favored proportions and scale and accuracy over emotion. And then we saw Phidias, the sculptor of the Parthenon, who was very formal and kind of static in his poses. Now we're going to look at some of their contemporaries and see some variety. So the first one we'll see in the late classical period is Scopas. And Scopas worked with Praxiteles. They were colleagues, but had slightly different approaches. Praxiteles liked to convey sort of an inner sort of psychology of his sitters, and so they have this kind of dreamy, faraway look in their eye. Conversely, Scopas is a little bit more dramatic. So he likes to show figures in action. The emotionalism is a little deeper and more exaggerated. Not as exaggerated as the poses, but it's still there. But one of his tells of Scopas and his school are these very deep-set eyes that you see in the figures. Here we have who is most likely Heracles, given the lion armor that he has, and he has his head turned, like someone's just called his name and he's turned his head and he's getting ready to go fight. So there's a little bit of interior drama there. And then this is another figure by Scopas. This is the figure of Mausolus, to whom the mausoleum at Halicarnassus was built, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. It's actually built by his sister/wife, who was so sad when he died that she had him cremated and then mixed his ashes with water and drank them so that he would always be with her. But we see some of the tendencies that we saw in especially with Praxiteles and his full-scale female nudes, that sort of hefty body style, and then also a little bit more attention to drama with regard to the drapery. Now this isn't Phidias's wet drapery style. This is a little bit different, but it's still it's got a lot of movement, and it's got a lot of energy, and it's got a lot of folds, and it does give us a sense of the body underneath the drapery. So we're paying attention to those little tells. And then he has the deep set eyes and the facial expression, still somewhat reserved. It's not overly dramatic, but it does exude some confidence. Mausolus was a warrior king, so you want to kind of give that vibe out whenever you can. Here is another from the same group. This is an image of Demeter, the earth goddess, and you can see also those heavier proportions that will become prevalent in Hellenistic sculpture, as well as the very active, moving, sort of oscillating drapery that we see there. Now the head shows us a little bit of an influence of Praxiteles in the softness of the skin. Praxiteles is all about the sensuality of human flesh and the softness of the flesh, and we definitely get that in Demeter's face here. Very graceful. And then we have this item, which is a relief sculpture by Scopas, or the school of Scopas, which shows us the battle of the Greeks and the Amazons. So, after the Peloponnesian Wars, where the Spartans come in and defeat the Athenians, there's a little shift in the type of sculpture that is produced. We get away from those sort of idealized, perfect physical specimens of everyone, and we start to show people a little bit more like they really are, complete with their flaws up to a point. In addition, there's an increase in emotionalism and there's an increase in drama, and we can kind of get a sense of that through this battle scene. There's all these diagonals. Remember the mosaic of Alexander the Great defeating the Persians that had all those diagonals, the diagonal spears, the diagonal arms, and so forth, that create that sense of tension and movement and drama. All of that is visible here, as well as the kind of billowing drapery as the figures sort of soar into battle to fight each other. There's a lot more movement. If we compare it to what we saw with Phidias, there's just a detailed view. And then if we look at what Phidias did on the Parthenon, it's a lot more formal. It's a lot less animated. It's very orderly. Since Phidias is sculpting for the Athenian state, he's got to adhere to certain conventions, and so everything is very proper and formal and not overtly dramatic and energetic. Side by side, there's contrapposto. There's a variety of movements. They appear much more relaxed and at ease. Comes through here. There's a detail of the sad dog and the weeping child. And then here is a closer view of the hunter himself, and you can see his deep-set eyes. And then with Phidias, everything is very proper and formal. What do we see? It's the woman. It's the grave stela of Hegesso, a woman who is picking out the jewelry that she wants to wear in the afterlife. And the jewelry box is being held by a servant. And so she's examining a ring, wondering if this is what she wants to wear for all of eternity. We have that wet, clingy drapery style, which is another hallmark of Phidian carving. But all of it comes together to show us some slight varieties in approaches to human forms as we go along. Here is another funerary stela, higher relief than what we saw in the Phidian style. This is around the equivalent to the white ground style in pottery. So images of women sitting at their own graves, that kind of thing. But there's more of a sense of emotion here and loss. The woman has passed on, but then her child is here and he's missing her and so forth. And so there's this sense of loss and grieving and mourning that we would expect to find on a grave marker. The next sculptor that we'll examine is Lysippus, and Lysippus was the official court sculptor to Alexander the Great. Lysippus claimed to be completely self-taught, and one of his sayings that he liked to use was that nature was always his only model. He only carved what he saw. He didn't make things up out of his head like some of his contemporaries did. He shows us an image of Socrates here, and this is quite a reach beyond what we saw with all those idealized young Greek figures. Now we have Socrates, who was not a pretty man. He's got sort of a pot belly and some sagging of the flesh and so forth. And then he has this very severe sort of look on his face, like you would probably expect from Socrates. Not a very pleasant individual by some accounts. So all of that kind of comes through here. We don't try to gussy up Socrates. We want to show him how he really looked, how he actually looked, which is a nod to what is going to become prevalent in Roman portrait sculpture. We want it to be as accurate as possible. So now with Lysippus, we're starting to play around a little bit with the idea of individualistic portraiture versus a type, a figure type. Lysippus also combines together some of the styles and techniques of some of his forebears. This is his Apoxamenus, or scraper, and it shows an athlete. This is a Roman copy of the Greek original bronze, and he's scraping the oil and dirt off of his skin to clean himself, and it's sort of a mindless task, and so he has this sort of Praxitelean, faraway look on his face. It's like the same look you would have on your face if you were raking leaves or something like that, something very mindless. And so he includes that, but also it's got a little kind of interior sort of, what's he thinking about while he's doing this? Is he wondering where they're gonna go eat lunch after church, or what's he distracted by as he's going through this mundane daily sort of ritual? This is also a sculpture that's meant to be viewed in the round, so it's very engaging and participatory. It's one thing to walk by and stand in front of a sculpture and go, okay, and then you walk on to the next one, but it's a whole other thing to have to walk all the way around the sculpture and see it from all sides, because there's usually little details that you would miss unless you walked all the way around and saw it from all angles. So this figure, when it was first revealed, was considered extremely sexy. And so Emperor Tiberius, it was originally installed in some public baths, and Emperor Tiberius wanted the original moved to his bedroom for whatever reason, and so he did. And then the people cried out, "Give us back our Apoxamenus! Give us back our Apoxamenus!" And so eventually they shamed him, and he brought the statue back and put it back in the bath. So there you go. Or than what Polyclitus had. Polyclitus had the figure at 7 heads high, and Lysippus had it at 8 heads high. So they're a little bit more attenuated, a little bit more graceful, but also more expressive. They have a lot more emotional content than what Polyclitus had. And the Greeks seem to prefer this. So here's another Lysippus. This is weary Heracles. So he's done his 12 labors and he is beat. He is exhausted. He's so tired, he's having to prop himself up by his own club here, with the Nemean lion skin sort of thrown over it like a pad. He can't even support his own weight. So instead of a very formulaic, idealized, youthful body, now we're interested in showing the human form in different sorts of states. Maybe he's very tired. Maybe he's drunk. Maybe he's aroused. There's all sorts of different states of being that sculptors are starting to toy with. And it's also something that's meant to be viewed in the round. If you walk all the way around it and go to the back, then you see that he's holding the golden apples of Hesperides behind his back. You would have missed out on that if you hadn't bothered to walk around it. So again, it's very engaging. It's meant to have you, as the viewer, kind of participate in it and get involved with it. That gives you a deeper emotional connection to it. It's the whole bedrock of what Baroque art is about in the 16th century. It's all about getting emotional reactions from the viewer. Even Michelangelo will take a nod from Lysippus with his David. If you only look at it from the front, then you're going to miss out on what's on the back. There's a little strap that holds the sling that's got all the rocks that he uses to slay Goliath. And then there's the hand. You wouldn't really see that angle unless you walked all the way around. And then you get to see the stones that he holds, that he puts in the sling to kill Goliath later on. And you get to see the contrapposto and the S-curve of the body. The head and the hands, though, on Michelangelo's David, interestingly, are enlarged because it originally was going to be on the outside of the Palazzo Vecchio, seen from about 30 feet below. Michelangelo knew this, and so he enlarged the head and the hands so that when viewed from the ground, they would appear to be in correct proportion. Just a little nice.
It seems like he'd be like really important.
He is really important. This is a fragment that probably was a full body.
Yeah.
They don't do very many busts at this point. Those are rare. So everything you see here, these are all fragments. The body has been lost over the years.
So the other full ones are more preserved because they weren't like actual figures.
Or they weren't as important. So yeah, easier to hide. Oh, if that reminds me, speaking of hiding, I wanted to tell you this story. So now we're going to look at some Hellenistic sculptural styles, and you'll see some of the attributes of Hellenism. Hellenistic sculpture tends to be more dramatic. It tends to be more emotional. You'll see an increase in eroticism. You'll see an increase in exoticism. So things that are weird and offbeat, we start to incorporate into sculpture. More individualistic portraiture. More interest in the variety of humans, old people, short people, different races. All of these things become fodder for sculptors. The poses and groups get more dense and more complex. And then the drapery, as we've already seen in the late classical period, starts to get so wrinkly and undulating, it just takes on a life of its own. So let's begin with a look at some mildly erotic Hellenistic sculpture. This is the theme of Eros and Psyche. Eros is Cupid, the god of love and desire. And here he is making out with his girlfriend Psyche, who was a mortal. And but they were allowed to carry on and have a relationship as long as she never looked at him in the face. And then one day she couldn't contain herself anymore, and she had to look upon him, and then he had to fly away. So their love remained noble and honorable and so forth. But this isn't some athlete. This isn't a king or a god or anything like, or it is a god, but it's more about just interactions, human bodies interacting with one another. It's about eroticism. It's about sex. So they're doing some light petting here for you. Here's another one. This one's a little more overt, as we have a satyr who is the Greek embodiment of lust, carnal lust. They're half goat, half man, and they. In this case, the satyr has abducted a nymph and is trying to forcibly have his way with her as she resists and pulls his hair and tries to get away from him. You can see a little goat horn on his head. He probably had cloven hooves as well. Those have not survived. And then there's this one. Also, this one troubled me for a while, the sleeping satyr. Supposed to be half goat, half man, and I looked at it and looked at, well, where's the goat? I see the man, where's the goat parts? And it took me forever, but there are little horns sort of hidden up in his hair with these ivy leaves. He would have had pointy ears too, and those are also hidden kind of up in the hair, but also he has this little tail. Little goat tail right there. That's it. The rest of it is all male anatomy, obviously. The pose is not by accident. This is quite gratuitous. You're meant to pay attention to one thing. All of the lines of this sculpture lead your eye to one spot. That's what you're supposed to pay attention to. Everything draws your eye there. So we don't have to play around and allude to eroticism. We can go full tilt boogie and show everything that we want to show. And that's as naughty as I'm going to get with you all. If there's plenty of naughtier stuff, if you want to go look it up. But there's his little tail. I got a nice close-up of it for you. And then here is a look at the face as he's sleeping, unaware that we're all standing around looking at his junk. And then here's one more. I kind of like this one. So Pan, who was a satyr, also half goat, half man, a little more obvious here. Here he is trying to seduce Aphrodite, and he's being a little forceful about it. So Cupid, her son, or Eros, as we saw earlier, has grabbed a hold of one of his horns, and with his other hand is probably going, no. But my favorite thing is that she took off her sandal and is about to beat him with it if he doesn't leave her alone. So, hey, come on, Aphrodite, I told you to leave me alone. Slap, slap, slap. So it's kind of fun, but kind of playful and erotic all at the same time. Here's another Hellenistic piece. This one shows an interest in different physical human types, like old age. So we have this old market woman who's carrying these buckets of water, and she's so old, and she's all stooped over. Her face is all saggy, her body is saggy, her drapery saggy. All this is about being old and decrepit. So we're interested in showing all the wide variety of humans that exist on the planet at the time. And then in the latter part of the Hellenistic style, we come into Polyeuctos, who was a sculptor who specialized in individual portraiture, so portraits that were meant to look exactly like the person. We did see it with Lysippus's Socrates, but it's not really confirmed whether or not it's an actual portrait, but this one is. So this is Demosthenes, who was a famous orator of the period, but he had a speech impediment. He was very brave and he had great words, but he stuttered. So here he's about to go out and speak, but he's a little pensive about it. He's a little hesitant, so he's kind of wringing his hands a little, and then his face looks a little hesitant. He doesn't really want, because what most likely happened, depending on how important the person was, is you could hire anybody for this much of it. Yeah. This could be anybody's body, but only this is the part that Demosthenes would have to pose for. And what most likely would happen is they would do a clay model, because you can work really fast and get everything the way it's supposed to be. And so he's posing for 2-3 hours, and you get the clay model, and then you work from the clay model to make the stone version or the bronze version. So there's his face a little closer. You can see his brow was furrowed. His eyes are looking down. His mouth is a little tight because he doesn't want to go speaking in public, but he does. He does what he needs to do. Also a Roman copy of a Greek original bronze. And then I found a Roman bronze copy of the Greek original bronze. This one is much smaller. So that happens from time to time too. If there's a particularly successful sculpture, people jump on the bandwagon to make copies of it so they can kind of ride the coattails of the original sculptor and make some money. It's like those cheap knockoffs or bootlegs of movies or something like that. You know, everybody, you find something that's popular, everyone's going to jump on board and try to make money off of it. Some little bronzes that came from a shipwreck that shows some little people dancing. So again, an interest in the variety of humanity that emerges. And then occasionally, yes, sir.
Would the full size bronze statues be solid bronze, or would they be hollow inside?
Do you remember the lost wax casting technique I told you about? That's what they would be. So there's a clay core that would have had that layer of wax, and you'd have all the details, and then they put another layer of clay. So clay, wax clay, turn it upside down, heat it up, all the wax runs out, turn it back right side up, pour bronze in, bronze for places where the wax was, and then you get rid of the outer mold, and then that's what you get. This one is just weird. It's just a weird sculpture. Sometimes there's just weirdness that gets done. I don't know who it is or why it was made, but it is expressive and unusual, exotic, if you will, of this boy wrestling a goose. And there are multiple versions of it. So it was the first time it came out, it was very popular, and so other people thought, oh, I need a boy wrestling a goose for my garden too. Here's a bronze of a ruler in the guise of a deity. So dressed up as is what the guise means. And this becomes very popular, especially in Rome, when we see all the emperors as Jupiter or Hercules or Poseidon or different gods and goddesses like that. It's just another way to kind of fluff them up and prop them up and make them look more important than they really are. And we saw it in Egypt whenever we would see the pharaoh as a sphinx, or the pharaoh as some sort of deity with hanging out with Osiris and Horus and that sort of thing. So in Hellenism, we start to play around with that as well. This is a Hellenistic bronze, slightly larger than life size, and it's in kind of a complex, sort of twisted or a corkscrew kind of pose that goes beyond just straight contrapposto. And he's in motion. He looks like he's walking while he's carrying this large pole, which probably would have a trident on the end of it or something like, or spear tip, something like that. Here's another one that I thought was kind of fun. Just from your eyes alone, what would you think makes this a Hellenistic sculpture? What qualifies it? Yeah, how so? Be more specific.
Because he looks like he's contemplating something, like this is his final moment.
Yeah. The one analogy or analysis I saw is that he's kind of sitting, he's an old boxer. He's been doing this for years, so he's in his 40s. He's had the shit beaten out of him for a couple of decades, and now he's getting ready to be called to go fight. He's just kind of minding his own business. Hey, Reese. And he turns, oh, yeah, it's my turn. I gotta go. And his wrists and hands are all bound with leather, so he can, his face is all pounded in too. He's got a big broken boxer's nose. So again, there's that interest in all things exotic. And then, like Mr. Gerdner said, it's very dramatic and has a lot of energy and life and movement to it. Lots of variety to the poses. There he is with his Owen Wilson nose. Huh? What?
He doesn't have eyeballs.
No. Why do you think that is?
Someone stole them?
Yes.
Maybe they were a different color material.
They were probably shell inlay. They get seashells that are white and they put little bronze pupils in them, or irises, and inset them into the face. Those have not survived. Why did they do that? They did it to make it look more real, more lifelike. Copper nipples, Going to go back to the copper nipples that we saw last time to make them more real and believable and lifelike. This is another nice Hellenistic sculpture. It's the winged Nike of Samothrace. A Nike was a mythological sort of angel-like figure that usually would swoop in to herald a military victory or announce a military victory. As she stands in the Louvre, she's on the prow of a ship. Something like this would be her original context. Wings flapping behind her, garment very clingy on the front but billowy in the back, as if she's just flown in and alighted to announce the military victory of so-and-so. Lots of movement, lots of drama. The garments are a little different from this. They're not quite as clingy all over the place. They're dry in the back, so they billow in the wind. There's a better view. But they do cling on the front, so it looks like wind blowing her, and then the wings behind her back fluttering about. There's a coin that survived that shows another Nike figure. This one's holding a horn, a trumpet of victory. So that could be what her arms and head were doing, blowing a trumpet, sounding a victory of some sort. There's a view from below at the Louvre. You can see it's amazing that she's as intact as she is, but it's very dramatic with lots of movement, lots of motion. Could have also been holding a laurel leaf, which is given to athletes for victory. So this is just one sort of hypothetical of what she might have looked like with all her limbs intact. And then there's another one. I feel like this one's probably more accurate. Very angel-like. I think of the Archangel Gabriel who blows the trumpet to announce things. This is very similar to that. And then I thought I would let you know the Nike logo actually is supposed to be a wing that came from this figure, winged Nike. Also a reference to Hermes, who wore the winged sandals so he could run really fast. And Nike wants you to think that if you wear their shoes, you'll run really fast. So, and then there it is, quite grandly displayed at the Louvre. It's at the top of a staircase, naturally lit. So when you start to walk up to it, it seems kind of small, and then when you get there, the thing's like 12, 14 feet tall. It's gigantic, so you feel very tiny once you finally make it up there. And then there's ours, out in the hallway there. They moved the lights since I took this picture. They used to look more like a roaring T-Rex back here. The shadow of the winged Nike, but they shifted the lights and you don't get that effect anymore, which is a shame. I like that bit. Incidentally, the one that is in the hall it's a copy from 1911 that used to be in the original Nebraska State College here that was about to get trashed, and then the art department saved it back in the 60s and brought it over here. When I think of Hellenistic sculpture, this is the one I think of, the image of Laocoon and his two sons. Laocoon was a priest of whom it was prophesied that he and his sons would be killed, and so he tried to escape from the Battle of Troy and avoid that so he wouldn't get killed. And then as he was on the run, these two giant snakes showed up and strangled he and his two sons to death. So it ticks all of the boxes for Hellenism. It's a dense composition. There's a lot of drama on the faces. There's drama in the poses. It's exotic with these big curly snakes that just look like giant mussels with fangs on the end of them. And it's all very fluid and energetic, and lots of drama, not holding back at all anymore. also at the Vatican Museums whenever you get to go see it. When I got to see it in the sculpture garden there was nobody there. So I got to have no one around and just enjoy it all by myself. Look at their faces, though. Look at the suffering as these snakes are wrapping themselves around them and strangling them to death. And then the dad is up there trying to fight them as well, but also trying to protect his son, so he can't do it all. But gosh, I just love this. So tense, so much emotion packed into one little image there. And then there's one of the snakes biting the thigh of Laocoon there as he tries to pull him off. And then there's his face. Lots of suffering, lots of pathos, terror. Even the hairs in his beard and the hair on his head sort of takes on a life of its own and turns into these sort of swirling, billowing tendrils of seaweed or something like that. Very animated. And then this is by the same sculptor group, but this is Odysseus. Same sort of look. The hair is positively alive. Here's another Hellenistic sculpture group. This is a Gaelic chieftain who has decided, rather than be taken prisoner by the invading enemy, he's going to kill himself. But he kills his wife first. So he's holding her dead body, and you can tell because she's just slumped. She's absolutely lifeless. Head hangs sort of lolled to the side, eyes open, mouth open, and also, incidentally, very near his genitals. So there's a little mix of eroticism thrown in there as well. And then he's holding up the sword and shoving it into his own chest area there, and you can see they've even sculpted the blood gushing down onto his chest as he shoves that in. So why would you sculpt this? Because this is pathos. You're supposed to feel sorry for them. You're supposed to feel some empathy. This is an image of honor. This is a chief who wanted to maintain his own honor rather than be taken captive and become a prisoner. Yeah, and he pays the ultimate price. There's another view, and the wife had to pay the price too. We don't know if she agreed to this whole murder-suicide pact, but there it is. And there she is. Pretty wild how you can sculpt a corpse and have it look like a corpse just by the way that it's posed. And then here's another. This is the dying Gaul. The Gauls were enemies of the Romans and the Hellenistic Greeks. They had this sort of wiry hair, and he's got a mustache and a torque necklace. These are the ancient French, ancient British people, the Gauls. And so here he's got his trumpet lying on the ground next to him. At his feet, he's still trying to hold himself up, but he's dying from some mortal wounds, and you can see the blood gushing out of his side there as he's still trying to maintain his dignity and hold himself up rather than just become another statistic. And then we have a portrait, another really individualistic sort of portrait. We don't know who it is, but we know it's somebody because it's quite distinct. The kind of receding hairline, the wrinkles on the face, the inset eyes, all of those things look like a certain person, probably a ruler who had a troubled reign and maybe was a little paranoid. All of that kind of comes through. And then this is another portrait of Euthydemus of Bactria, who was a ruler, very tough ruler. He put up with no guff, and you get a sense of that through his facial expression of determination and seriousness. So to sum up, here are our sculptors by name and their traits and how you'll be able to tell the difference. Polyclitus was all about that mathematical formula of human proportions. He was the first one to master contrapposto, and he also establishes the tradition of idealized young male forms. And then we had Phidias, who did most of the sculpture at the Parthenon, very formal, a lot of idealized grandeur, and included the wet drapery technique in his carving style. And then Praxiteles, his figures were very fleshy, have that dreamy, faraway look on their face. He also sculpted the Aphrodite of Cnidus, the first full-scale nude female form, and his works tend to be very graceful and have that S-curve to the body. Scopas, we just talked about, deep-set eyes, lots of movement, lots of expressiveness. And then Lysippus, smaller heads, kind of synthesize the other styles together. And Engagedus wants us to walk around his work. And then Polyleuctos conveys the personality of the sitter as well as their appearance. And then he also increases emotional and psychological depth and sculpts aging people. He doesn't just capture them at 30 years old, he shows them how they really look. Now on into architecture. So the Greeks had a pretty strict formula for their architecture, at least early on, and they really didn't deviate from it. It's a little different from some of the other pieces of architecture that we've seen up to this point. Most notably, the Greeks took into account the totality of the structure. It's not just a frontal emphasis or a side emphasis. They want everything to be balanced all the way around. We can divide Greek architecture into three orders, and the three orders are most easily identifiable by their column capitals, which are the very tops of the capitals. We have two feminine orders and one masculine order. The Doric order, which is here on the left, is the masculine order, and then the Ionic order and the Corinthian order are the feminine orders. They have these plant forms incorporated into their capitals. The other identifying trait of a Doric column is that it has no base. The column goes all the way down and connects to the stylobate, or the top step of the stairway, directly, and then the other two have bases. These other two are styles of luxury. They're reserved for, especially the Corinthian style. Corinthian columns were usually only used on the interior, and like in ladies' baths and that sort of thing, because they were so ostentatious and luxurious. That's where we saw them. But these are the three basic orders of Corinthian architectural, or I'm sorry, Greek architectural styles, and we see them applied philosophically to different temples. So a male god would typically have a Doric temple, and then female gods and goddesses usually have Ionic temples. But early on, everything was Doric, and then they developed the other two a little bit later. So some of the oldest examples of Greek architecture aren't even in Greece. They're in Paestum, Italy, which is where we have these two structures. Paestum was a Greek colony, so I forget which city-state sent those folks over there to establish themselves, but still there. You can equate this to roughly the geometric period in vase painting, or the archaic period in sculpture. So we have figured out how to make columns, and they're freestanding. We don't connect them to the wall anymore like the Egyptians did. They are doing what they need to do, which is hold up the roof. There's a little bit of overkill in these earlier versions, way more columns than they really need, so it's kind of dense. They're still figuring out all the engineering qualities and what they will put up with. They're like arms. So your forearm is thicker at the bottom and then thinner at the top. That's what these columns are supposed to be. They're like big stone arms that hold up the ceiling. This is a Doric order. The fluting, the ridges on the outside of the column go all the way down to the stylobate, and then the capital is just that echinus, that squished cushion that we saw in Aegean art. Here also a lot of overkill, way more columns than you actually need here. There's another view, and you can see same amount of love is given to the whole building all the way around. It's a good way to engage your visitors and have them enter from any side before they enter into the cella, which is a room on the inside of this. This is the outer sort of porch area, and then there's an inner sanctum as well. I'll show you that in just a moment. There you can see a little more clearly the echinus and the entasis, and the entasis is that tapering of the column that we learned about in Aegean art. As far as the plan goes, it has a peristyle, which is this row of columns that goes all the way around the structure. And then we have the cella on the inside. There's usually a little porch area here before you enter into the cella. This one's weird. It's one of the only temples that has this colonnade that sort of splits it in half. So you have two doorways that enter into the cella instead of one, which is typical. And then you get to the back, and here there would have been a giant statue of Hera. Hera was a sort of a goddess of fertility and crop growth and so forth, so she's pretty popular early on. In the day, this is what they would have looked like, all intact with their roofs and their sculpture and their cella and everything painted up to be quite elaborate and impressive. And then here is the Temple of Hera. It's very massive. It's not just a big building, but all the proportions are massive. The columns are really thick and overdone. The entablature on top, which is from here up, very thick, very massive, all to project a sense of power and strength and so forth. Order, stability, all of that comes through. But eventually they'll realize that they can do it a little bit more elegantly and not just punch you in the face with these images of strength and power. On the inside of another nearby temple, the Temple of Poseidon, we have a second colonnade on the inside. So the columns go up, and then they have a level, and then they continue up as if it's one long continuous column that is split by the floor here. So there's another little bit of attention to detail. There's a view from the inside looking out. If you can kind of imagine it with a roof on it and being surrounded by a wall, dimly lit interior with torches and such, it would have been a supernatural place of mystery. And then there's a view of the column capitals. There's the plan, same type of plan, except in this case we have two rows of columns instead of one. Got the outer porch area, and then the entry here, and then you go in, and here's the cella, and then this is where the statue of Poseidon would have been. And then not too much later, we have made quite a bit of progress as far as elegance goes. The Greeks realized that these columns will actually support the roof, and so they thin them out and use a lot fewer of them, which gives us a more airy, sort of open approach. It's still very powerful and stable, but just a lot more elegant. So this is what this Temple of Aphaea would have looked like when it was intact back in the day. You kind of get a sense of that. There's our outer sort of peristyle, and then you go through the porch area and then enter into the cella to the Holy of Holies. Roof was wooden, covered with terracotta tiles, and then there would have been statuary at the corners to further decorate the surface. And there it is, all painted up. I threw this in because that's where this guy came from. He used to be right here. So that's him. You remember him, Mr. Pulling the arrow out of his chest with a big smile on his face. There he is. And then in the classical period, think of the red figure style of pottery, and then think of classical Greek sculpture, the disc thrower, that sort of thing. We have the Acropolis in Athens. It's a big outcropping of stone in the middle of the city, and then on top of it we have some of the greatest examples of Greek architecture that have survived down to us today. It was originally supposed to be a military outpost, a citadel, because it's up on this raised sort of platform. And then Pericles, General Pericles, decided to turn it into a religious center. So he built the Parthenon and the Erechtheum and the Propylaea and the Temple of Athena Nike, and turned it into this very elaborate religious complex that exists today. There's a view from above, looking down, and you can see it's surrounded by Athens proper. A few olive trees floating about here and there, including a little theater, and we'll see a closer view of this in just a few minutes. But highway, active highway right next door, apartment buildings and so forth, stuck right in the middle of, oh, there's another little theater right over there too. And then there's another view. There's a layout. You can see how everything is arranged. This would have been the heartbeat of Athens. Everything that was important took place here at the Acropolis. That's what it would have looked like, all intact. All of the buildings not exploded or anything like that. The first place that you visit is the Propylaea, which is the entryway to kind of psych you up for all of the other buildings that you'll get to see once you enter into it. The most famous building is this one, the Parthenon. This is what it looks like now. And you remember the Turks decided to store gunpowder in there in 1687 when the Venetians invaded, and they launched a mortar in and hit the gunpowder and blew the roof off. There is some marble cancer on the outside. That's all from pollution. They've cleaned a lot of this off since I've had this picture for 20 years. So they've cleaned it off since this was taken, and it's a little cleaner than it was. But there's scaffolding. There's always bloody scaffolding in all of these places. All the Greek temples, all the Roman ones, all the Gothic cathedrals. Every time I go, there's somebody's doing something with scaffolding, and it's blocking my view, and I won't have it. I won't have it anymore. There's a view from the side. It's built according to the golden mean of proportions, which is 6.17 to 1. Which is considered to be the most human-friendly of proportions, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So the width of the column is equal to 5 times the height and that sort of thing. They also made a slight adjustment, a visual adjustment. So instead of this being a straight line that goes all the way down the side from the front to back, it bows up very slightly. Because they knew it would have, if it were perfectly straight, it would have the illusion of kind of sagging a little, so they compensated for that, and it actually arcs very slightly, just an inch or two. But all of that is to compensate and make it more organic and human friendly and appealing, more than just a big stone box to go and worship in. even little adjustments like making the columns on the corners slightly closer together so they still have that appearance of stability. There's the layout of it. You've got the outer porch area, and then you enter into the cella when there's this giant 40-foot statue of Athena Parthenos, which has not survived but has been described pretty detailed throughout the centuries. And then there are various friezes and sculptures on the outside, and we saw a good deal of those when we looked at sculpture. That's what it would have looked like back in the day. Everything painted up, nice, bright, opulent colors to give a sense of power and riches and success. There's the proportions, the golden rectangle proportion. It's called. Those are the. If you take this rectangle and then divide it by these portions, you can take the largest rectangle that's left and then divide it by the same proportions, and then take the largest rectangle that's left and divide it by the same proportions, creating kind of a spiral like a nautilus shell. Here we are looking up through the peristyle, which is that outer row of columns, through to see the inner frieze, the Ionic frieze on the center that shows the Battle of Marathon. Here's you, and here's the frieze. So you're pretty far away, 30 feet away from that. However, Phidias adjusts for that and enlarges the proportions so that you can make everything out from the ground. Thanks, Phidias. That's where these guys are. These are the ones out in the hallway there, and you can see they're very formal. Even though it's a battle scene, everything's very organized. The horses all have exactly the same pose at exactly the same time. It's a very orderly battle, not chaotic. Appreciate you and thinking of us and your long dead sculptures. There's my artsy-fartsy shot to show you how far off of the background those sculptures project, which is a pretty good bit. So when the light hits it just right, you get some nice interplay of light and shadow, and as you walk around it, it might even have, to your ancient Greek eyes, the illusion of movement and energy. There's a reconstruction of what the statue of Athena Parthenos would have looked like on the inside. She's described pretty detailed in a lot of different records. She would have been covered with chryselephantine, or layers of gold and layers of ivory, so her skin would have been gleaming white, and then she's wearing this lovely golden gown and holding her weapons. Athena was the goddess of war and fighting, so since being a warrior is sort of a masculine thing, we give her the masculine order, or the Doric order, on the inside. The columns go, or the fluting goes all the way to the floor, and we have the simple squished capitals on them. There's another reconstruction of what you would have seen. There might have been even a little reflecting pool of water in front of it. This is a Roman copy of what the original looked like. She's holding a little Nike figure, a little military victory figure in her right hand, and then she's wearing a crown of divinity, or a diadem. Here is a view of the Propylaea, the entryway to kind of psych you up to enter into the Acropolis, also on a masculine order, so we can project forth a sense of strength and power. That's what it would have looked like back in the day. It's almost the idea of a processional, of having to go through all these different stages before you reach the Holy of Holies on the inside. There's an alternate view, and you can see not only the Doric order of column, but also the triglyphs and metopes going around the outside. There's the stairs going up, and you can see a little bit of the Pinakotheki on the left, which was an art gallery. The Greeks had their own galleries of art where they would put vases and wall paintings and so forth. And then that's how it would have functioned as you went up. This is the remains of the building that we're seeing. It's just a big gateway. And then there's a reminder of our three different orders, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. And now we're walking back up the stairs again, and we see this cutie pie, this little temple of Athena Nike. It's pretty minuscule compared to some of the other ones that we've seen. And so it gets an Ionic order. It's a feminine order because of its small scale and graceful appearance. And you can see the volutes or scroll shapes on the tops of the columns there, and then the bases. And then we have a frieze that goes all the way around. These are all temples dedicated to different aspects of Athena. Athena Parthenos, the warrior; Athena Nike, the military victory; Athena so-and-so, and Athena the love. All the attention is given to the front of the temple with almost no regard. Fun, there's the back. Nobody cared about the back. This is kind of interesting because it's very much a frontal emphasis all for the back of it. There's one of our sculptures from the outside. It's Phidias's Nike adjusting her sandal, and you can see the remains of her wing in the background there, and then the wet drapery. And then the third type of column that I'll show you is the Corinthian capital, and it's made up of layered acanthus leaves, and it also includes these little volutes, which are fern heads. You know, when ferns first grow out of the ground, they make these little spirals. That's where that comes from. There's another view. Usually on the interior, but later on we'll relax those standards and we'll see them appear on the exterior of some buildings in order to communicate riches and glory and so forth. This is a view of the Erechtheum. The Erechtheum is a little temple dedicated to Erechtheion and his daughters who were sacrificed for the good of Athens at one point. It's also the location of the olive tree of Athena. So the Athenians had to decide who their patron god or goddess was going to be, and so they had a contest, and the gods had to give a gift to the Athenians, and whoever had the best gift would become the protector god of Athens. And so Athena struck the ground, and with her spear, and an olive tree grew up, and the olive tree gives us olives and wood and olive oil. And then Poseidon was also in the mix, and he struck the ground, and a little freshwater spring erupted so they could have water. And the Athenians decided they liked the olive tree better. And so Athena got to be the patron goddess of Athens. Athena, Athens. They named it after her as well. Supposedly, that's the tree. That's the very olive tree that Athena. But I don't think it is, because it's not very old. It's maybe it's like the great granddaughter of the original tree. I don't know. But the coolest thing about this building is the back porch. This area here called the Porch of the Maidens, because it has these wonderful caryatids on it, and the caryatids are just columns that are shaped like women. And so they wear crowns on their heads. The crowns become the column capitals. They have wrinkles in their garments, which become the flutes of the columns, and they stand on little bases. So it's like they're all columns that have come to life. Now, when you go see it in person, those are all copies. They took the originals out so they wouldn't erode more from the acid rain. But there they are. Quite animated, quite unusual. It's fun to see the Greeks experiment with architecture and decoration just to see what they can come up with. There's another view. One. That's the one in the British Museum. The other ones are in Athens. Good catch. So there's the remains of the temple of Olympian Zeus, which has Corinthian columns on the outside, one of the very first buildings to do that, but it's technically not Greek. It's a Roman reconstruction built by Emperor Hadrian, but it's still one of the first to use the Corinthian column, so I thought I'd show it to you anyway. And there's what's left of it. Another one of the wonders of the ancient world. This is why we talk about the pyramids, because they're pretty much there. These are all little fragments. This is another sort of interesting experiment in architecture. It's called a hypaethral, which is essentially just an open air columned courtyard. They didn't put a roof on it so that you could enjoy the heavens. It's a little temple dedicated to Apollo, but you can't get to the statue of Apollo very easily. You've got to go through this very narrow little pathway in order to get to the statue. Anyway, it's just an experiment. It's a one-off, but it just shows us that the Greeks are willing to kind of relax their standards and play around with things and try new ideas. Elsewhere, we have the Agora, which is the marketplace where everyone would go to trade goods and also have civic meetings and that kind of thing. And you can see it, there's usually a large open air courtyard next to the covered walkway, which is called a stoa. So there's the stoa, and then it's full of stores. I just caught that. I'm going to the stoa. Well, get me some bubble gum while you're at the stoa. And then there's the open air marketplace. And then these are all dwellings outside. There's the Agora in Athens, still there, still intact. It's like a mall. It's like a shopping mall. It's a covered shopping center with all these little rooms, and each room is a different merchant that deals with different things. There it is today. Now it's a museum and offices. So imagine having your office in what used to be a bakery or a brothel or something like that. And then here's some more experimental architecture. It doesn't just have to be a temple or dwelling. We can have architectural artworks like altars and that sort of thing. That's what this is. This has, it's really most notable for this frieze that goes around the entire outside of it. If you unwrap it, it's something crazy like 400 feet long or something like that, covered with these very active, dramatic, Hellenistic sculptures, and you can see the influence of Scopas there with those deep-set eyes. And then the last thing I'll show you that the Greeks gave us was the idea for IMAX seating in the movie theater. So it started out as a reaction to Greek theater. People loved the theater. It was an integral part of Greek society. They would perform plays with moral messages, myths, all that sort of thing. And usually you just sit on a hillside and everybody would look down so that everyone had a good view. And then they decided to actually sculpt little seats where each successive layer was higher than the one in front of it so everyone could see. And apparently these early theaters are built so acoustically perfect that the people down here can whisper their lines, and then everyone, even in the back row, can hear every word. And that's the concept behind IMAX seating in the theater. Also, there's one more. Stadiums built the same way. And it's an LSU stadium because I hate the Huskers. I like the Tigers. So there, chew on that. And that you can discuss it now if you want to. It's discussion question time. That's all I have for you.